Hello, hello, and welcome to episode number 34 of the Tom, Stu, and You podcast. Tom, how are we doing?
Episode 34, eh? I'm doing good, man. I'm really good. How about yourself?
Mate, can't complain. I'm excited for this one. Nice little chill episode for us.
Yeah, definitely. Well, seeing as though, I don't know if you remember, but back in the day of starting this podcast,
A couple of months ago.
Yeah, we set ourselves the target of reaching 100 episodes. And as we're at episode 34, that's more than, that's a third of the way there. So I think that, we thought with it being a third of the way, it's a nice time to slow down the pace a little bit, take stock of where we are, see what we've learned, see what connections we've made with speaking to people, and also themes and things like that. So yeah, it should be good. Should be
a good one. So yeah, we're calling this one "What Have We Learned Doing This Podcast?" And let me tell you, we are learning a lot.
Definitely, and it's a continual process, but it's great though, because it's one of the reasons why I wanted to do the podcast. Really, was to continually learn from people. I sometimes felt personally that once you leave school or whatever educational institution you reached, you kind of just stop learning. You enter a sort of echo chamber almost. So it's been a really good process. There's been a lot of learning from people, and also just learning personally, to do the research required for a lot of the topics that we speak about.
Yeah.
A lot of work goes into it behind the scenes, more so from yourself, of course.
Oh,
who does
mate.
all the editing and all that stuff.
I was about to say, this video is looking fabulous. This audio is sounding wonderful, and I definitely haven't stressed at all about this new technical stuff, because I've probably mentioned on the podcast before, maybe I haven't, but I'm about to go on a big cross-country road trip here in Canada. And we thought, why not 2 weeks before I disappear across Canada, where, internet is known for being wonderful, and cell reception is definitely outstanding everywhere I go. We'll just throw in the video aspect of a podcast.
Yeah, we don't make things easy, do we?
No.
But we don't. But we clearly we don't want to do things by half as well. So that's also a positive point for it. But yeah, that's a good point. Like, how are you feeling about the whole road trip thing? Uprooting yourself from Canmore, how's it going?
Yeah, I mean, change, right? Change is scary. Apprehensive is a good word for it, but also excited. It's most of the amazing things that have happened in my life have come about when I've embraced change, such as giving up my accounting career and moving all the way across the world to Canada. And here I met you when we decided to start a podcast a couple of years later.
Exactly.
So I'm sure it's all going to turn out wonderful, and I'm very, very excited for
the adventures.
Just the awesome adventures that we've got coming up. But yeah, it's a fair amount of planning still to go, and I have about a week from when we're recording this podcast, even less from when we actually release it. So yeah. Yeah, it'll be fine. Nice. It's gonna be great.
And so do you have like an idea of where you're going, sort of what you want to see, what you want to do?
Yeah, so I'm starting in Alberta and then going to BC, and then back to Alberta, and then ducking all the way across to Ontario, and then just camping for a couple of days in each place, and then picking up a different friend, and then coming all the way back out to the west coast, all the way to the island, and then back to Alberta, and then moving to BC. Yeah, I'm gonna put some Ks on my brand new car.
Sounds like a lot. Yeah, definitely. And what's great is, if I'm correct in saying, you're going to be meeting up with some of the guests that we've had on the podcast, right?
Yeah, so I'm road tripping with Austin, heading east, and then picking up Wabi in Toronto and road tripping with him west. So yeah, we might have to do a couple of other guest podcast episodes, I think, with the boys.
Sure, that'll be
great.
Some
more words of wisdom from the wise and wonderful Austin and Wabi, and a new friend, Branson, as well. So
cool. Sounds great.
Some exciting
Sounds
things
great.
coming up.
And I'm not jealous at all.
I can tell.
Yeah.
Follow me on Instagram. Awesome, and I'll post all the photos and videos. Probably like in the middle of winter, to be honest. At this point, I haven't done any fun edits of my summer adventures already. So this is going to be great.
That's how it always goes, though.
Yeah.
That's how it always goes. I'm still posting pictures from Canada now, like over a year later. So, that's how I live vicariously there. And now it will be through you. And every time we do this podcast while you're on the road.
Look, I'm happy for people to live vicariously through me. someone asked the other day, is my life as good as my Instagram makes it look? And it's okay. But obviously, I'm not posting the 9.5 hour export for the video podcast that we did with Peter last week, and the fact that the audio
Yeah.
didn't work after 9.5 hours of exporting, so then you had to redo it.
Yikes.
Yeah, but it's one of those situations where I knew something wasn't right when I knew how long it was going to take, and
Hmm.
I couldn't really be bothered to fix it, so I just decided to let it run overnight. And then in the morning when it didn't work, I had already figured out what was wrong and why it had taken so long. So then I did have to go back and
Hmm.
actually fix the issue. So, look, words of advice. When something's gone wrong, just fix it at the start. Don't just let it. It's just going to be worse. So, yeah.
Yeah,
Do it once, do it properly, as my
definitely.
dad always likes to say.
Well, that's a good motto. That's a good motto.
Yeah.
And and I like a motto that I live by, I reckon, is that, everything's fine in the end. Everything always comes out in the wash, sort of thing. You always, find a way to overcome these problems. And much like, your friend Claire that we had on about adjusting to a new country and that sort of thing, adjusting to change, you're going to be doing that, that soon as well. And you've done it before as well, but when you've been living in a place for a long time, so you've been in the Bow Valley for a while now,
Yeah.
it does kind of become home, right? And so the discussions that we've had with people like Claire about change, I'm sure will be useful to you, like going forward.
I'm actually going to be catching up with Claire in a couple of weeks. Not even, in a week and a half. Yeah, so
That's
I'm
great.
very excited. Very excited to be seeing my friends again, because
Yeah.
I think one downside, I guess, to being a world traveler and being okay with change, is that a lot of my friends are spread out all around the world, and so amazingly, things like this podcast can keep me in touch with them, and the beauty of technology and the internet, the wide web. So but it is always nice to see people in person.
It is, it is. So that's a good point you raised. Like, one of the things that has been apparent to me from doing the podcast is that, and from looking at things like technology and always being connected, looking at the stuff that Tristan Harris does, with the Center for Humane Technology and things like that, is that it's important to use technology consciously. And we've discussed this before, and it's something that pops up in every episode, really. Because I'm talking with you every episode.
Yeah.
Or talking with guests every episode, in order to have, an informed, researched, a learning experience when we have guests on, and it's using this technology, which is fantastic, to make connections with people rather than just interacting with a screen or what have you, where the interaction only goes so deep, when it's that kind of communication. So that's been a real cool thing to see. And it's also great to just, as you said, connect with people, but connect with people that maybe you haven't been able to speak to for a long time because you've not been in the same area. I've had people on like Hannah, who I haven't spoken to for many years, like probably since school. And it's great to be able to catch up with them, see how they view the world now after so many years, and see also and hear about the great work that they've been doing as well. So that's been a great journey.
Yeah,
for me.
And the more we do of this, the more people that are reaching out to us with guests that we have never met before. We don't know some of these people.
Exactly. Yeah.
And now,
Exactly.
like, I talk to Kaylee pretty regularly still.
Nice.
Peter and I chat constantly on Instagram because he's posting some fire videos. So if you haven't checked
Yeah,
out his
definitely.
YouTube channel, definitely check that out.
For
So
sure.
that's exciting. We got like a couple of new guests coming up in the next few weeks as well that we're lining up for you. So we're trying to expand our own echo chambers even. So we say regularly that we want to break the echo chambers of all our listeners, but at some point we have to also confront the change within ourselves that is needed to get outside the echo chamber. And even though when we're looking into some of the topics that we talk about, I'm obviously looking at sources I wouldn't usually go for, and I'm definitely actively searching for alternative opinions, but sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And it's not until you start to have these conversations with people about their lives, their stories, and what they find interesting that all of a sudden you're like, oh, I hadn't even thought about that, hadn't even considered that as being a thing. So
yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, that's also been a great thing about the podcast, is that it's enabled us to learn from people, often like experts in the field as well.
Mhm.
So like with Jessie doing the work that she's been doing, Mubdi, absolutely so interesting to think about the universe and our place in it because so I took a picture of Neowise, and it reminded me of that episode that we did with Mubdi because I had my mate in it, and it was like a person silhouetted with the Neowise in the background.
So
It
Instagram.
made me think about Instagram, yeah. But I was trying to capture like the universe. We're just a small part of the universe, right?
Yeah.
And we're only here for like in the blink of an eye, really, when you put us into the context of history. And it really reminded me of the discussion that we had with Mubdi. And whilst we're here, what I take from that is, why can't we all just be like nice to each other? Because we're not here for that long,
Yeah.
So we should make the most of it and all that kind of thing. And we're all the same. We're all literally all the same. So yeah, and it's just great to get the views of other people and learn from them. For sure. So that's been one of my favorite things about doing this podcast. Other things that I've learned is that it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to do this podcast.
Yeah.
More for you, as I said, because you do all the editing, but the amount of because I like to be as informed as I can be, and a lot of the topics that we speak about, like Mubdi's a perfect example.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know much about. I know like a layman's sort of interest in the subject matter, but obviously you want to go a little bit further to try and understand the topic a little bit more, to inform your question in a little bit more, so you can get a little bit more out of the interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just found that like doing the podcast is like a job on top of already having a job.
Yeah.
I don't know how you found it, but that's my experience.
Yeah, I mean, my old housemates used to joke about the fact that they weren't even sure that I had a job to start with, let alone 2 jobs with a podcast. So,
Yeah.
Thanks guys. But it is, yeah. It's like I probably spend in total like a day and a half of my week just doing podcast related stuff specifically. So by the time we record and run an episode, and then by the time I edit it, and then I do all the social media and get the graphics all done and stuff, like it does add up. And then if it's a topic that I need to actually research, that's why I love guest episodes so much. I don't have to put as much effort in. I can just focus on questions.
Learn from them.
Yeah, exactly. But it does bring up a good point in that I posted something on my Facebook actually just the other day, and it was an article from New York Times. Don't do your own research when it comes to some of the scientific controversies, in quotation marks, as it were, of our time. And I really connected with that article in that a lot of the haters online, I guess, there's always going to be someone somewhere that is saying an opinion that you agree with. And when you, I guess, when you say that you've done your own research, you're basically like completely disregarding a lifetime of experience and research of people who actually know what they're talking about. So scientists, educators, economists, social workers, all that sort of stuff. Doing a quick Google search is not research. You don't understand the context. You haven't had the upbringing. You don't have the background, the education. You don't know conflicting opinions. You don't quite fully understand the biases that are inherent in every different subject matter. And like we often say that we've researched the topics that we discuss on this podcast, and I guess like we use the definition of research very loosely in that like we have Googled it to consider where we base our own opinions, but
I haven't done a PhD.
I haven't done a PhD in each of the topics that we've done, and I think what we've tried to do, and hopefully what we've done well, is that at no point do we ever pretend like we have the answers. We might sound like we think we have the answers, but I hope our listeners are media literate enough to understand that, to understand the nuances, and that we don't pretend to know the answers. We're not giving you the answers. We're purely presenting what it is we have found. We are presenting our opinions on a whole bunch of different topics, and we are trying to provide information from people who have actually spent their lifetime studying the different topics that we talk about. So, we are we're almost a source of information as opposed to no, we're a collector of information, I guess,
Yeah.
as opposed to being a
Yeah.
source of information.
Yeah, that's good. I like that analogy, like a conduit kind of thing,
Conduit.
like
Yeah.
a medium sort of thing. Yeah, I agree. That's why, especially with stuff that we don't know about, we try and get guests on where possible.
Mm-hmm.
And every time we've personally looked into a subject and spoke about it and formed an opinion about it, and it is an opinion, it's an informed opinion, which is better than just plucking something out of the air.
Yeah.
But at the end of every episode, we always like, tell us if you agree with this,
Mm-hmm.
if you don't agree with this, what your views on it are. Why do you think that we're wrong? Because the whole point, well, one of the main points why I wanted to do this podcast was because what I was observing during the election at the end of last year, and what we've seen in previous elections and Brexit and Donald Trump and all that kind of stuff, is just the left, which I consider myself to be a part of, just throwing shit at the people from the right, and then people on the right doing exactly the same back. And there's nothing constructive there, nothing respectful there, no like debate, no respectful debate at all. And so this podcast is an attempt to create an environment, a culture, a community, ultimately, hopefully, where those kind of discussions can be had. Because those are the discussions that we need to have at this moment in time. With the rise of fake news, with the rise of feeds that are designed to keep your attention, that are designed to aggravate you, to annoy you, to keep your attention. It's important to break these echo chambers, as we say. And as I said at the beginning, I was just trying to be a small ripple,
Mm-hmm.
in order to try and make the place, better if possible. And that's it.
Yeah, I think, like, even further than that, I think what I was seeing a lot of is people arguing based on opinions in which they'd never really considered why they held those opinions in the first place. And I will be the first to say, and my mother will chuckle at this if she listens to this episode in a couple of days, but I do love to argue. And if someone says something, thinks something different to me, I regularly will go out of my way to argue with them. My intent might be to change their minds. Sometimes it's just for fun.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just to annoy them. Sometimes it's just to go fishing for a bit of afternoon entertainment. Yeah. But
you just want to see if their ideas stand up to your Stu's considerable duress. That's all. You're just testing theories.
Yes, SCD. Yeah. I might have to start using that. But like a lot of the time, I was finding my own opinions weren't really based on any sort of concrete foundation of thought and constructive criticism. I may have read a couple of news article headlines and then all of a sudden formed an opinion, but it sort of like hit me all at once that I didn't have much more of a leg to stand on than a lot of the people that I was arguing against. And even though my opinion may have been more popular, I wasn't necessarily able to say why. And I think, I wanted to do this podcast and start to think about some of the big topics that you don't really get a chance to think about every day because life's tough. Like, we're busy. There's other things I'd rather be doing. Sometimes other things I'd rather be doing.
Cheers.
So I get it. I understand why people don't want to think about the downfall of capitalism every day, and they don't want to think about how technology might be screwing them over and how the gamification of apps is keeping them distracted from thinking about, our overlord capitalist billionaires.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. And that's interesting that you can speak like that you said that you're also testing your own, your own beliefs, your own ways of doing things. What I really like about that, and I agree with because I feel it as well, is that the podcast has given us a sense of responsibility and accountability for what we say. When I say things that are going to go on the internet, into the annals of the internet, into the Twitter sphere for forever, I want to, be informed, and I want to have facts, and I want to formulate my own opinion, having read a diverse range of literature on a subject. because like Chomsky says, you should read it across the spectrum, which I do try to do as best I can. So I'm responsible for everything that I'm saying, and there are reasons behind the views that I have, or I try my best to provide as much reason as possible, especially when it comes to stuff like capitalism, which I think is an important discussion for everyone to have. When we had Kelly on, I liked her insight into the term expert, and she said no one's an expert, and things are changing all the time, and I think that's true. Just because we've had this way of living, capitalism, for a long time, doesn't mean it's the best way of doing things anymore. Things change, and I think that what I really wanted to do in terms of capitalism is just show people that it's not all great, because we're not taught to constructively criticize the systems in which we live, throughout our education. And we've dealt with that previously in the why we should rewrite history episode, and looking at the censorship that happens there. And so this podcast is really just about me being responsible for the views I hold, providing the reasons for those views, and then hopefully opening it up for a discussion. That's the ultimate goal of why we're doing this, I reckon.
Yeah. And a good heated discussion is a great way to spend an afternoon. It's a great way to spend a Thanksgiving, a Christmas, an Easter, a birthday party. Bring the family around, make it a family affair, get them all involved, get them questioning what they're doing.
For sure. Because as I said, like I was getting the feeling that a lot of stuff wasn't making sense to me. And reading the Facebook comments on certain posts is just like, it's demoralizing at times. So I was just hoping that we could create a space where people would think a little bit more about what they're saying, the views they hold, why do they hold them. Because as I said before, I feel like education stops at the point, and when we've talked about education and how bad it is, that's one of the main threads that has come up time and time again with every guest. In fact, I think education doesn't seem to be fit for purpose, and so if your education isn't fit for purpose and then it stops, what is that the reason we have like the rise in xenophobia, nationalism, right-wing governments across the world? The left is not doing that great across the world. Is that the reason why? I think it could be a causative factor. There's a lot of evidence that seems to be suggesting that, and this podcast has provided me with a platform to look at those things and be responsible for what I'm saying regarding those things.
Yeah, I mean, we're not trying to start a rebellion here or anything, but if we can all just have a think about
evolution,
if we can all just be a little bit more optimistic and a bit more considerate about where we want to end up, how we want to behave as people, and what we want to be thinking in our everyday lives, then if we can help provide some different perspective, something you might not have considered before, some sort of information you've probably never heard before, or maybe just an interesting discussion about a topic that you've never really sat down to think about, then I feel like we've achieved our aim. We've broken your echo chamber, even if it's something as, seemingly on the surface as mundane as how to become a creative, right? What is that? Why was that episode important to everyday people? Well, it's providing a perspective on a segment of society that maybe you've never thought about unless you're yourself a creative. When we talk to Bronny, when we talk to Bryony about their creative process, why is that important? Well, we highlighted just how important creativity can be, and especially in something like a pandemic where all of a sudden you're trapped within your own four walls, your own walls within your mind. The people that have thrived in this sort of environment have been the ones that have hobbies, have creative pursuits, and been able to express themselves through different mediums. We've seen people pick up baking, pick up painting, pick up digital art, photography and stuff, things that they never would have had the time to do. And it just shows an almost hidden desire of the human spirit to express creativity in one form or another. But the busyness of our day and the busyness of our week to sort of distract us from ever fulfilling that need. So being able to slow down and see that has been great to hear other perspectives and to provide even just examples as to what some of the people in that industry are doing, and maybe help someone replicate it if they're not sure where to start.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's just interesting because I think everyone can have some degree of creativity, and I think they do.
Mm-hmm.
That manifests itself in myriad ways, really. Um, so even people doing important work, like my mum's a nurse. She's a very creative person. She makes like nappy cakes for people, and they are works of art.
Yep.
They actually are. She does like flower arranging, and she's entirely self-taught. This is just stuff she does for people for free in her spare time. So that's one example. And she always says that she's not good at these things, but she is. And so talking to creatives and things like that is just great because everyone has creativity. It's super important for culture
Mm-hmm.
and how society works. It doesn't just work off, getting a job, becoming a lawyer, an accountant. That's not how society works. During this lockdown, have people needed more lawyers, or have they been on Netflix watching like artists, actors, all these kinds of things that are super important? Yeah, as we spoke to, Bronnie and Bryony and Warby about the education system, the art subjects aren't given near as much gravitas as like STEM subjects and maths and English and all that kind of thing. Those are important connections to make because it's important that we need creativity. And just going back to education, there's a guy called Sir Ken Robinson. People should check him out on YouTube. He's done TED Talks. I think he has the most popular TED Talk ever. He's got the most listened to,
Mm-hmm.
which is, do schools kill creativity? And there's a huge argument that they do. And he's a guy who's speaking from a position of expertise. He's an advisor. He's been a teacher. He's advised governments on teaching policy. And that is certainly my experience as well, because I loved art at school, but I didn't feel like it was something that I could choose. I didn't feel like it was an option, because it wouldn't get me the neoliberal career that we spoke with Kelly about.
Yeah.
School is designed to create a certain type of person. It basically kills creativity and encourages conformity, and it doesn't realize that people are individual and learn in different ways. Some people are more creative, some people are better at the math subjects and stuff like that. And so his work is really interesting, and I think shows that there is a problem with education and that we do need to bring it to a more individual based style of learning and have the same level of importance for the creative subjects as well, because that part of the industry is in real trouble now with the coronavirus. I know people who work in the creative industry, and it does look pretty dire.
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to get people back into theatres and all that kind of stuff with social distancing? How are you going to pay performers, actors, all that kind of thing? And yet, places like Netflix and Amazon have added billions to their net worth, to the stock of their company during the pandemic. There's something that's not adding up there, and these are the connections that I see from talking to all these people about all these different topics. It's really interesting, the patterns that you can see if you step back and look back at the body of work that we've done, which I am proud of to look at, on the website, and see all the people that we've spoken to and all the topics that we've spoken about. They're all connected in some way, and that's really, really interesting to me that you're able to make these connections.
Yeah, I love looking at our guest page on our website, which is tomstewandnew.com.
Yeah, me too. Nice plug.
Yeah, of course.
Get better at the plugs,
mate. It's a good looking guest page.
It is good.
We've got some real interesting friends, and we don't just interview friends, obviously, but we're just starting a podcast. We're just two guys having a chat with some friends and recording it. But yeah, I can't wait to see over the next 33, 34 episodes when we're 2/3 of the way through. I guess by then we'll have another 15 guests or so to add to our guest page. So I'm quite excited to see an increasingly diverse range of people, perspectives, and stories, because everyone has their own story. And I think that's the key takeaway that I found from doing this podcast, is that everyone has their own story. And if you ask the right questions, everyone's story will mean something to someone.
Definitely.
And it's just
Like, I
about
couldn't agree
finding
more with
it's
that.
just about finding those questions. And I think if we were to listen back to the first couple of episodes, I'm sure we would have been super awkward with our prepared list of questions. Um,
Yeah.
but I think we're getting better, and I mean,
Yeah,
hopefully the listeners are
I hope
great.
so.
Hopefully we're getting way better at asking the right questions. And I think a good sign is when our guest goes, that's a good question. Or, oh, I don't know. I haven't thought about that before. That's what we're aiming for
Yeah.
every episode.
Yeah, definitely. I love to see comments, where people have said, "I feel like I'm learning loads,"
Hmm.
or things like that, or "I never thought about it that way." That's the reason why we're doing this. That's fuel for me to keep going. So thank you to everyone who has provided feedback. Whatever feedback that was, whatever form it came in, whether it was like agreeing with us, saying that you thought that you had learned something, or whether you didn't agree
Yeah, we've had a
and
few of
were
them too.
challenging us.
Yeah.
Yeah, a few of them. Yeah, if you didn't agree, then that's great as well, because I actively seek out constructive criticism. I didn't used to as a kid. I used to hate it, but constructive criticism is key to growth. Really,
Hmm.
it allows you to reflect. It's all part of the respectful debate thing, and being cognizant and having account of other people's views, as long as they are constructive. Like, you don't have to listen to bullshit.
Yeah, I think that's a key point there, actually. Maybe something we should clarify too, because I was actually thinking about this the other day. In our first couple of episodes, and when we were talking about doing this podcast, we had made comments, and our intention was to get people on that we intentionally didn't agree with. Um, to widen our perspectives. And I think part of the growth that I've certainly experienced myself, and I think you have too over the last few months of doing this, is that we've sort of come to the realization that we don't need to give platforms to people who purely disagree with us um, without having any sort of justifiable position, I
Respect,
guess.
but it's
Um,
also a respect.
a respect thing too. Like I know, there's one guy I have on Facebook who disagrees with me on literally everything, and we
Mm.
had initially considered getting him on as a guest, but to give someone like that a platform when they haven't been able to express to us any, um, you know, proper understanding or any sort of like reasonable um, support for their opinions, I guess.
Mhm.
Like,
Well, it's just the fact that if the potential conversation is to be judged by the comments that you received, it's just going to descend into some sort of disrespectful, slanging match, basically. And
yeah,
it's not gonna be productive, which is what
which is what we're looking
respectful,
for.
productive, constructive. Those are the kind of things we're looking for. I know who you're referring to, and if we could have a respectful conversation, I would absolutely love that to happen. It'd be great. It would be great. But whether that can happen, because judging, by the comments that you receive, it doesn't look like it could. But yeah, there's always hope.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking back to as well, like the episode that we did on Planet of the Humans documentary, and
Mm,
our key
mm,
point of contention, I guess, on that episode and in one following it was my belief that we shouldn't be providing people with a platform um, purely to provide an alternative opinion on something, I guess, that um, the matter has been settled on, I guess, is a way to put it. Just
mm,
because there's an alternative opinion doesn't mean we need to give them a voice. We don't need to pretend like it's a valid opinion to hold. While, yes, there is value in hearing all alternatives, I think there's less
mm.
value in just purely allowing someone to talk an opinion, um,
Yeah.
as opposed to taking a step back and considering, is there a is there a justifiable reason for them to hold this position, or is it purely based on pushback, I guess, against, the standard media, the left or scientific consensus, just not wanting to follow the rest of the crowd, just not wanting to be a sheep, I guess. And it's a fine line we play.
It is a fine line. It is a fine line. I kind of liked that episode because I feel that up until I feel like that episode is one where people would be like, do these two agree on this? What's happening? Do you know what I mean? Because I think our positions were slightly nuanced. Like, you didn't want to provide them with a platform, but I was like, I think we should listen to them. They've done it ham-fistedly. It's horrible. But I think that because I looked at the people who made the film, and I know that they had an involvement and were supporters of the environmental movement. And often your worst critics come from, internally, sort of thing. So I was like, we should hear this out. And, for example, fossil fuels do go into making these things. If we can go further and eliminate fossil fuel usage in making these things, that's great. That's what we shouldn't come to a point and go, this is the best that we can do. Renewables is the best that we can do, because there might be something better. We don't know where the science is going to go. And that goes to what Kelly was saying in about being an expert. We're an expert on the state of science as it is, but it's continuously developing, which is great. And that's why we need to keep having these discussions, and why, I'm not for. I think I said in the censorship episode, I'm not for deplatforming people who speak at universities or anything like that, because you should expose yourself to the nonsense as well, because you have to learn that is nonsense. I think it's important to do, because if you are aware of yourself and you educate yourself, you continually educate yourself, which, as we've said, is difficult to do, especially when you've got jobs, kids, bills to pay, all that kind of stuff. But it's vitally important at this moment in time. Then you create like a cloak. You'll be fine no matter what you hear. Do you know what I mean? It's like armor. Like, continually educating yourself and trying to seek the truth is like armor. When you're dealing with people like that, and if you have great arguments, and they're got a solid foundation, but you're also respectful of what they're saying, and you're listening to them, and then effectively communicating back why you disagree respectfully, then I think that's great. That should continue.
Yeah, I think it's the learning part of what you're basically saying there, I think, is important. So, like, whereas in a university setting, you are surrounded by other people where, after having heard the nonsense, you would then follow it up with discussions amongst your peers, or perhaps it's more of an organized discussion on stage with some sort of moderator. The key issue, I guess, I have with something like that documentary was that there's no place for learning involved in something that is purely a one-sided presentation. And that's basically what the form YouTube has taken, is that even with the comment sections descend into chaos so quickly that even if you were to actively search for some sort of deeper understanding of the documentary, you might actually find it quite confusing, based purely on the comment section. So, like, especially when we did that censorship episode, Noam Chomsky saying, it's freedom of expression is more important than what it is they're actually expressing. Like, it's hard to disagree with someone as well renowned as Noam Chomsky. So, like, I do understand that as well. But you can just see how all of these big topics that we're covering all interconnect with one another. And sometimes it supports you, and sometimes you come out the other end and you're like, oh, I feel so much better having done that episode. I feel like my opinions are so much more solid. I have a better understanding. The context makes sense now. And then other times I'm just like, I don't know. I don't believe what I thought yesterday, and I'll probably wake up tomorrow and think something completely different. But that's also growth. That's also growth. It's real annoying, but
I thought this was settled, and it's like, no, it's not settled. You've got to do a little bit more work on that. But that's good. That's great.
Personal
It's
development,
important.
right? Is there something you think?
Exactly.
Is there something you think you've learnt in particular, like something specific you feel like you can a key takeaway from the podcast that we've been doing?
Well, I've got okay. So personally,
Yeah.
on a personal level, um, I used to be quite. I feel like this podcast has been great for me to just say what I think and what I think.
Okay.
No, but like I mean, like what I think is important. I have got stuff to say,
Yeah.
and previously I've been quiet about it. If you know what I mean, stuff hadn't been making sense.
Yeah.
And I'm like, do people not see things the way that I see things? Am I like like alone in the way that I think about things? Which is obviously never the case, but you can. So it sometimes feels like that.
Mm-hmm.
And doing this has enabled me to say what I think with accountability, with responsibility, with research, because we do put in a lot of effort to continually educate ourselves about the topics we speak about, not to expertise standard, as you said before, but to try and have a good grasp of the material. So it's been great for me to be able to have a place to come and speak, about the problems that I see, and then there are other people who think this as well. And we also talk about topics, and those topics links to that topic. The environment links to capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
How do you continually, have infinite economic growth on a planet with finite resources? It's actually insanity. You and I have spoke about living with wildlife and how amazing that is, and what a privilege that is. We spoke about our own lifestyle choices that we've made because we see the state of the world. We see the Australian bushfires that we talked about in episode 2. And we talk about not eating meat anymore in a later episode because that has a huge carbon footprint and contributes to the warming of the planet, and it just is abhorrent for animals. We talk about historical context. So I personally think that later on in history, this period of history will be judged poorly by our treatment of animals. That's just what I think.
Mm-hmm.
But everything is connected, and that's been a great thing to see. Another thing that I've learned is that everything is actually connected, and it's amazing. It's hard to explain to people, but that you can just have all these discussions week on week, and then go. I went onto the website, just doing a little bit of reflection and looking back for this episode, and just as you say, go onto the episodes page or whatever, and you're like, wow, I can make connections between all of these things. That's been wild to me to be able to connect everything. How about you? What have you found?
So personal growth for me is that I don't hate the way my voice sounds as much as I did in episode 1 when you.
See, I was going to say I still can't my voice.
I
actually sound like.
I still hate it, but I think after doing it, after listening to yourself talk for on average now 33 hours, possibly, I guess. Eventually you get to the stage where you're like, all right, yeah. I mean, I still don't love it, but
well, you've accepted it.
People listen. Yeah, I've accepted me for me.
That's brilliant. That's great. That's great.
Yeah, I like the accountability, and I like having conversations that aren't edited. For one thing, less editing, less time involved. Makes my job way easier. It's hard enough as it is. That's literally we just came up with the rest of the excuse.
How can we make this lack of wanting to edit a win-win situation?
Yeah, I mean, we're basically doing that with the video right now. I've literally spent, I don't know, a day and a half trying to figure out how to make the video so it's ready to publish instantly as soon as we're done the recording, so I don't have to edit it. We'll see how that goes. Yeah, I mean,
economy of effort.
If this YouTube video doesn't look amazing on YouTube, then it hasn't gone right, and we have the podcast audio to hold us accountable for that. But we'll fix it. We'll get it making it look nice. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been a challenge to get your thoughts collected. I think that's something maybe I wasn't very good at previously. I tried journaling in the past, but journaling often turns to emotions and feelings more so than sometimes like constructive, productive thoughts and opinions on a wider range of topics. So, like, even though we do this unedited, we still have had to spend at least a bare minimum amount of time beforehand actually trying to come to some sort of like opinion and conclusion before we click the record button, because otherwise these podcasts would go very, very differently.
They would indeed. Yeah, maybe we should just do that one day though. Like, just go, what are we talking about today?
Isn't that this episode?
Oh, is that this episode?
That's basically this one, yeah. Just winging it.
Too much research for this episode.
yeah, too much, yeah. What do you see as a challenge coming forward? Like, what areas of improvement can you see us focusing on? Like, what's the challenge for you?
I think the challenge going forward is certainly to get more diversified opinion on the podcast, especially people who hold views antithetical to our own. So for just probably the most obvious example is probably someone who is pro-capitalism.
Yeah.
That'd be good. Because there's loads. I'd love to I could speak about it for days. I mean, I often bring it up, and you know, friends do like joke at me and stuff like that about bringing it up all the time. But I will continue to do so, because it's important. It affects us all on a day-to-day basis. And I do just think that we need to go beyond it in order to solve the problems that we have. But that's for another episode, coming soon. So I think to get, you know, or you know, someone who thinks that a vegan diet is not the way forward, who thinks that, you know, plant-based is not the way to go, because obviously I think it is. So definitely to try and reach out to people who, you know, we don't have a personal nexus to, you know, more and more, to get people on board who are just, you know, because growing up in my town, it was kind of like an echo chamber, and then Banff's kind of an echo chamber in a way, you know, like a bubble. And then obviously you've got those people on social media, so your social media kind of becomes an extension of that bubble. And if you don't actively seek out different points of view like we do, you know, every so often for this podcast, that's hard. And if we can have a respectful, informed debate with those kinds of people, that's certainly something that I'd like to try and, you know, for us to do more. It'll be more challenging for us. It'll be a lot more work. But I think that, you know, the fruits of those conversations could be really good, really interesting, thought provoking. So that's what I hope that we can achieve more of going forward. How about yourself?
Yeah, I think I'm most excited about finding guests doing cool things and doing things and living lives very different to our own. You know, even though I'd like to think I've had somewhat of a wonderful life up until this point, and it's been quite adventurous in terms of like living the full corporate life, to then giving it all up to go backpacking for 5 months, to then giving that all up to then move to a different country, and then you know, giving up a corporate job for a retail job, and then giving that up for now an online creative job. Picking up new skills, hobbies, and adventures along the way. There's still a lot of life that I just don't see. A lot of perspectives, a lot of, you know, like life choices, I guess, you know, what ifs that maybe I could have taken that I didn't end up taking. And I think I'd like to talk to people that did end up taking that path, just to see if I made the right choice. But also just to see how it panned out.
That could be a demoralizing episode.
Just like, oh, I should have. I'd like to get, as you said, I'd like to get people who have different beliefs to us, not necessarily about anything big and significant in terms of, like, I don't know, someone who doesn't believe climate change exists, for example. Like, I don't think that's going to be a productive discussion. It might be somewhat productive in, like, just figuring out the way their mind works and how they've possibly come to disagree with scientific consensus, which is the most important invention in all of human civilization. But besides that point, you know, like, I want to interview someone who thinks, like, that money is the best thing and the most important thing to go after. I want to meet someone who, like, has a family, 2 kids, they're looking for that white picket fence, and the whole American dream. Like, I want to talk to someone who, invests in cars for something, like some sort of like cars, or I want to talk to a mum who's like a single working mum and stuff. Like just to figure out, like, everyone has life lessons for us all to learn, and I think a life lesson segment of our podcast would be a sweet thing to do. Obviously, everything I say is golden, and everything should be taken as if it's a life lesson. But yeah, I want to talk to a comedian. That'd be sweet. I want to,
yeah, that would be good.
Other podcasters is always fun because I like the tech side of things too, and I feel like we are starting to get a bit more professional with the tech we're using. I don't know if anyone cares about understanding how we actually make our podcast happen from 2 different locations around the world, with pretty much every single guest being remote. Feel free to send us an email or slide into our DMs if you want some actual details. But we basically use all free software, and then we just pay to actually host the podcast, which then gets sent off to Spotify or iTunes or wherever you're listening to.
Yeah.
I do find it quite ironic that when you're reading the articles about how to start up a podcast, the first thing suggested is that you do it on YouTube because it's a free host. And now, episode number 33, after having paid all this money to host it on all the fancy subscription services, we are now jumping on board YouTube as well.
Yeah.
But
but it's all a learning process.
It's all a learning process for sure. And at some point, we're going to have some fancy graphics and animations, and sliding in and sliding out. We'll have some live comments. We'll start streaming episodes live at some point, but we'll have to like do a huge big party for when we hit episode number 100, and we'll invite friends around. I don't know. We'll have a live crowd or something. But
we get every guest back on.
Every guest back on. We'll do it.
Be hectic.
One of the podcasts I listened to, they did a 24-hour live stream where they had something like 20 guests on in 24 hours. We could do that for episode 100 and just get all of our guests back on.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That would be wild, actually.
That's a lot of tech that we need to figure out beforehand, though.
Yeah.
We're not in it to get famous, but we are in it to meet new people. And I think we're definitely on that track now where we are starting to meet new people and having chats with mostly my science friends that I haven't spoken to in a decade. So.
Yeah. No, it's great. It's awesome. That learning and, seeing those alternative worldviews that you're talking about, because everyone does have a story.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people just don't think that they're like, because I even thought this, that like no one, is bothered about what I think and stuff like that, when, we are.
At least 15 people, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great. It's
That's
great.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mum.
Yeah, cheers, man. Yeah. But yeah, just if we can continue doing that, I'll be very happy, and just excited to see where it goes. Because every episode's getting guests and confirming guests. I find is quite an exciting thing to do. Do you know what I mean? To like,
it's terrifying.
Set things up.
To like message people out of the blue.
Like, just them out of the blue and go, what do you think about this? And then they're like, yeah, I'm well up for that. And that's often actually how you get them to start listening to the podcast.
Yeah, it is.
So it's a win.
Yeah, it's a social media strategy you don't hear often, but the way to grow your Instagram and Twitter and Facebook following is to actually interview people on your podcast and just increase one at a time, just one follower at a time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that's it. Because they feel, shit, I've got to do some research.
Shit, yeah, I've got to actually listen. That's our second strategy. Yeah.
I think it's a great strategy actually, because like it's a win-win. You're getting the content, and then you're getting the listener as well.
Yeah.
So everyone can have that one for free.
Yeah, thanks, guests. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah,
that's been a
Tom's top tip.
Thanks all of the future guests who are listening to this episode to wonder what we're actually on about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We know what's up.
Yeah,
we know
I'm excited. I'm excited to see what else we discuss and what other connections can be made, because I'm from the pattern that I'm starting to see. I'm starting to think that everything can be connected that we talk about. And it's just finding how it is connected. And I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and just know that your life, your story, your opinions, like they do all have value. I think it's so easy to get caught up in our own heads. I think sometimes where, from a lack of self-confidence or some sort of history, whether you were bullied in high school or something, like they have residual effects on the way you live your life and perceive yourself. And
Yeah.
you don't have to reach out to us, but if you do want to, like, we will literally have you on as a guest because we want to know why you live your life the way you do. We want to know what your hopes, your dreams are. We want to know where you've gone wrong in life, what you regret in life, what some funny stories, even if it's just a funny travel story. Like, I know people love to hear about all the times where we haven't been perfect, and I think it's important to note that humans aren't perfect people, and
definitely not.
I have no doubt that at some point already, I'm sure as well, we've said something that we don't believe even now to this day.
Probably.
And at some point we'll get trolls to go back through all of our episodes and they'll pull out some comment post it on Twitter, and we'll have a big blow up about it. But if that gets us famous, that gets us famous. But if not, like, I think we have to realize that people have value, and I just want that to be the key takeaway from this episode, is that you personally, whoever's listening right now, has value, and truly,
we want to talk to you.
If you want to, reach out to us and we'll have you on as a guest. We'll find something, because everything's connected. We'll find something that connects to one of our previous episodes. We don't have to talk about a big topic like capitalism or politics or the environment, even if it's just something funny as moving to a new town or what you do for a living, where you've been traveling.
Yeah,
we'll make it great.
Anything and everything. Yeah, that'd be great.
So if you want to, send us an email at hi@tomstewandyou.com. Slide into our DMs at TomStewandYou on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as well. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter, where we're posting our top quotes from each of the episodes every week.
Definitely. Don't forget to hit that subscribe on YouTube as well now.
Yeah, that's it. 3 whole subscribers as of this episode. So thank you, Peter, Tom, and myself. God, people always wondered what our beautiful faces look like and what we do when we're talking to you through the airwaves. Now you can watch us. I know my sister did mention that she only really listened to the podcast when Mum was listening to it, but she'd prefer it to actually be on YouTube, because then it's not as easy to stop paying attention. So if I'm looking at the screen, then I know I'm looking at her listening. Gotcha.
For sure.
Yeah. But we've got an awesome guest lined up for next week, so definitely tune in again. Tom, do you want to give us a little update as to what to expect?
We're just going to be talking about, living in different countries, being outside of your home country, looking back on your own country and what that experience is like, the perspective it gives you, and loads of other stuff as well. It's gonna be a good one.
Escaping your bubble.
Exactly. Exactly.
So stay tuned for that. But until next week, everyone, this has been wonderful. You're listening to the Tom, Stu and You podcast, and we hope you stay safe, look after yourselves, stay healthy, you have value, keep listening, subscribe, like, follow, slide into our DMs. Amazing.
Awesome. Thank you. Love you. Bye.
Bye. Love you too, Tom.